One of the most interesting aspects about living in Mexico full-time is learning about and adapting to the differences in society between your home country and Mexico. Hi everyone, my name is Mariana and you are watching Mexico Relocation Guide TV, your expert guide to living and retiring in Mexico the right way. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 8 tips that'll help you integrate into Mexican society as an expat. Starting with number 1. If lunch is dinner, then when is dinner? You know, in a traditional sense, Mexicans are used to having their main meal of the day during lunch, and it's usually between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m. And that's because office workers tend to work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. So the middle of the day is usually 2 p.m. And quick fact, if you didn't know about this, a study measuring the longest hours worked throughout the entire world ranked Mexico as number 1 for being the hardest working country in the entire world. Even public and private schools are used to closing down for the children to go home and enjoy a meal with family or make a run to the nearby food truck or OXXO. And although it's commonly called in other parts of the world as siesta, you won't really see stores and shops close in the middle of the day. Most urban touristy areas will stay open. And, you know, lunch is leisurely taken. It's not something that's really rushed. Now, dinner, on the other hand, is usually had around 8 p.m. So it's much later than we're probably used to in many parts of the world, especially if you're from the US or Canada. In Mexico, lunch tends to be at 2 p.m., whereas dinner tends to be around 8 p.m. or later. Another funny thing about living in Mexico is if you're in the mood for tacos for lunch, the typical taco restaurant or taqueria doesn't usually open until after 5 p.m. And that's because tacos in Mexico are usually a late night food. So you'll see families and friends enjoy them together after dark in a packed restaurant where the tacos are usually sold by the piece. Number 2, the family pharmacy doctor. One of the things that amazes me is the availability of very affordable healthcare in Mexico. How often are you able to call a doctor back home when you haven't felt well, only to find out that you can't get an appointment for the next 2 weeks or longer? Well, that's not the case in Mexico. Here in Mexico, that problem is solved. If you need a doctor for a minor ailment, doesn't have to be anything big, just about every farmacia or pharmacy has a doctor right on site, usually next door. Now, a lot of expats refer to these doctors as doc in a box, and that's because their consultorio or their private practice is usually in a pretty small office, so it tends to be very boxy. Now, the really amazing thing about these doctors is they'll write a prescription, they can actually diagnose you right on the spot for minor things, right? So, you know, something like if you had a cold, if you had a stomach bug, something like that. And you normally wouldn't pay anything more than 50 pesos for the consultation, which is about $250 US. And you don't need an appointment for any one of these doctors. You can just walk in, get a diagnosis, get your prescription, go next door, get it filled, and you're done. And in most cases, most prescription drugs are available over the counter at a fraction of what you would pay in the US. In the US, you'd be lucky if you get a doctor's appointment the same week. Then on the day of your appointment, they'll probably want to just check you out. They won't diagnose you. They'll schedule a future appointment for you to come in and incurring you another cost. Whereas in Mexico, you can see an appointment usually, or you can see a doctor usually the same day without an appointment, diagnose you on the spot, write you a prescription, go to a farmacia, get it filled, and you incur one cost of a doctor's appointment. In Mexico, healthcare is not heavily regulated by big pharma, so you can get appointments quickly for things like MRIs, lab work, x-rays, and a variety of other procedures that usually require a referral in the state. Plus, in most cases, you'll pay a fraction of the cost even if you don't have private health insurance. Number 3, acknowledging people's presence when you're walking down the street or in any public scenario. So how many times have you ever walked into an elevator or a bank lobby or some other public space where nobody acknowledged anybody's presence? Isn't it kind of weird? In Mexico, Acknowledging people's presence on the street or even just saying a simple buenas tardes, buenos días is very common, and in fact, it's just common courtesy. When you walk into a bank, when you walk into an elevator, when you walk into any public space, so maybe like a restaurant or a panaderia, a bakery, it's very common for people to say hola, buenos días, or hola, buenas tardes, or hola, buenas noches, which translates to good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And if you just want to shorten it, you don't want to have to learn buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, you could just say buenas. But practicing a common courtesy of just acknowledging people when they walk you by the street or when they walk into an elevator or just when you walk into a restaurant is a simple way that you can integrate into Mexican society as an expat. Number 4, full service. So when was the last time that you visited a full service gas station? Well, here in Mexico, they are all full service. Not only do they pump your gas, but the attendants also clean your windows, they check your tire pressure, and they even check your fluid levels. Always remember to tip between 10 and 20 pesos, as is customary to do so here. And also one note of caution is many scams do tend to happen at the pump. So beware of what's going on to ensure that you're not taken advantage of. In our complete Mexico relocation guide, aside from also giving you tips on how to move to Mexico with residency, pets, healthcare, all these other topics, we also give you a list of some of the most common scams that you can avoid, and that way you're not taken advantage of. Number 5, grocery baggers, also known as cerillos. Another big difference you will find here in Mexico is at the supermarket during the checkout process. You'll see some senior citizens volunteering to bag your groceries. These are known as cerillos. So they are not actually employees of the store. That means they don't receive a wage. Instead, they are members of a government-sponsored program called INAPAM, which is catered towards seniors over the age of 60. They usually work 6-hour shifts, 6 days a week, and have flexible schedules so that many seniors can participate as much as possible. But unfortunately, many only receive a small government pension. So this means this is a golden opportunity for them to earn some pesos just from tips. So make sure that when you're having somebody bag your groceries, you give them a tip. Now, it's a customary tip to give them at least 10 to 20 pesos. However, if they have bagged your entire despensa or your entire pantry for the month, then obviously tip a little more. Number 6, choose your Spanish words wisely. Now, probably the biggest social difference that you'll notice between Mexico and other places like the US or Canada is language. You will find that many locals do not speak a single word of English outside of the tourist areas, right? Learning Spanish is totally going to make your life a lot easier and you're going to be very productive. Even learning just a few basic words will go a really long way. Now, every national I have ever met is extremely proud of their country, traditions, their customs, and their roots. Respect is truly an honored tradition here in Mexico, and even strangers will greet you with a buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenos días, or simply just buenas. Now, if you are new to Spanish or just beginning to learn Spanish, it's important for you to know when to use it in a formal sense and in an informal sense. So, for example, the formal form is used in situations where you meet someone for the very first time, people who are usually older than you, and usually in business transactions. These are usted and tú. These two mean you, right? Like in English, they both translate to you. However, tú is used to talk to someone, or usted, is used to talk to somebody who is older than you, whereas tú is used to talk to a friend or people that are younger than you. Let me give you a few examples. Usted, ¿de dónde es? Where are you from? Tú, ¿de dónde eres? Where are you from? So you get where I'm going with this? You're still asking the same thing in English. However, in Spanish, you will use the formal sense, which is usted, or the informal sense, which is tú. When in doubt, and if you don't know which one to use, I would just default to usted. Number 7, Latin time. And I'm not talking about time zones. You know, we as Americans typically make schedules and appointments for everything. Punctuality is just part of our society, you know, with a few exceptions. Your entire perspective of American time or being on time or being very punctual disappears when you move to Mexico. In fact, the Spanish word ahorita, which translates to right now, is a great example of Mexican time. Ahorita can mean everything from right now, to later, to not today, never, possibly maybe later. It all depends on the context, obviously. You might be talking to somebody who truly means right now. Now, Latin time is important for you to know so you can avoid having headaches in the future. For example, if your contractor says that he'll be there at 10 a.m. on Saturday and he doesn't show up until 1 p.m. on Saturday, don't get frustrated. It's just part of the culture. It's also part of the culture that if you're invited to a party or a get-together or a dinner and the dinner is at 7 p.m., it's okay and it's totally normal for you to show up at 7:30. And then again, of course, there's context here. If you're going to a wedding, if you're going to an immigration appointment or something that has a very rigid schedule, then definitely show up on time. Another interesting difference about time in Mexico versus time in the US or other parts of the world is in Mexico, the format of how you would fill out the date is day, month, and year. Whereas in the US, you would fill out month, date, and year. And this trips up a lot of people because in immigration forms or in a lot of legal forms for Mexico, you will see that this is backwards. So always remember, in Mexico, the day goes first, then the month, then the year. And the final way that you can integrate into Mexican society, it's always a good idea to carry some pesos. Now, for the most part, Mexico is changing into more of a credit or debit card society, especially after the pandemic, where handling cash seemed like a dirty thing to do. And outside of the tourist areas, there are many shops like local taquerias or local taco shops and local markets that only accept pesos. For example, if you went to a bathroom in a public space, there's usually an attendant who will hand you some paper towels or do some of the cleaning, and tipping is customary, but they don't take any credit cards. That is a good example of when pesos are a good time to have them on hand. Now, on the 1st and the 15th of the month, you will see tremendous lines at banks and ATMs with a lot of local people withdrawing their salary to pay their bills and living expenses. So a lot of expats avoid banks at all costs on these days because unless you really need to go to the grocery store, you really need to go to the ATM, the longer lines just usually aren't worth it. So the 15th and the 30th, try to avoid these days. These are known as quincena, which translates to a 15-day period. And in all honesty, it is virtually impossible to live here without at least having some change, some pesos. You're gonna need pesos for everything from local shops, restaurants, tipping, and with that comes another issue of dealing with large bills, because usually if you go to a local market and you're buying something for 60 pesos and you only have a 500 peso bill, it'll be really hard for them to give you change for that or for them to be able to break that bill for you. So here's a tip. If you go to any bank, and you have to go to the actual teller, not an ATM. If you go to any bank, it doesn't matter if you have a bank account or not with them, you can get change through a bank teller. Now, be polite about it. Some bank tellers may give you a hard time about it, but in most cases, this really works for you to be able to break a 500 peso bill, a 200 peso bill into smaller change. And trust me, you'll need it. So there you have it. Those are 8 very interesting and important tips that will help you integrate into Mexican society as an expat. I would love to know in the comments down below, what other tips do you want to know about? What are some things that you struggle with about living or moving to Mexico? Let me know in the comments down below and I'll make a video for you in the future. My name is Mariana. You are watching Mexico Relocation Guide TV and I will see you in the next video. Hasta luego.